Remember, Mugwort, what you revealed, what you established at the mighty proclamation. Una you are called, mightiest of herbs. Hey there, you beautiful heathen. Welcome to Iowa's Initiations. I'm your host, Matt Sargent. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the 9 herbs from the 9 herb charm and the benefits that they bring to your eco garden. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. I'm all about heathens providing food, fiber, fuel, and medicine for their kin and kith. All of these herbs have tremendous medicinal uses, and getting into those or covering all those in one video, all 9 herbs and their medicinal uses and the ecological benefits, would just take way too much time. So if you want to learn more about the medicinal uses of these herbs outside of how they're used in the 9 herb charm or using them in the 9 herb charm, drop a note in the comments. That said, as I've been farming over the last 8 years and paying attention to growing food, fiber, fuel, and medicine in an ecologically beneficial way, I've been astounded at the benefits that most medicinal herbs have for the landscape. Not only do they heal us and our kin and kith, but they heal the earth. It's almost like there's some sort of beautiful design the Allfather plugged in there. And real quick, before we jump into the 9 herbs, I want to give a shout out to all of my loyal fans, but especially Rusty Shackelford. Rusty always leaves amazing comments. Go back through some of the older videos, watch them, and then read what this genius has to say. Very smart guy, and I appreciate your enthusiasm. First up, number 1, mugwort is a great plant to have in the herbaceous layer. Most of these are grown in the herbaceous layer of the 7 to 9 story food forest. But it's really good because it can outcompete a lot of grasses, and grasses can choke and smother out young trees and shrubs, and this prevents that from happening. It's super friendly for pollinators, a great habitat for beneficial insects. If you're ever going to run sheep, goats, even your chickens through the eco garden, even for a short period of time, it has some anti-parasitic effects. This kind of gets into medicinal stuff, but it benefits beings other than yourself with those anti-parasitic effects. It's also a very hardy plant and grows quite rapidly. So if you don't need it medicinally and you see it grow up, you can just chop it and drop it and use it as mulch to help feed the soil, conserve water, all the great benefits of mulch. Betony, number 2. Wood betony, or any betony. Really interesting plant here in that it's hemiparasitic, and it kind of parasitizes a numerous amount of host plants and draws nutrients from them, which sounds bad at first. Oh my God, parasites are terrible, right? Well, in this instance, it actually promotes biodiversity because it stunts other plants and allows other plants to germinate and get ahead, plants that it doesn't have this parasitic effect on. It also produces a bountiful amount of nectar, which attracts pollinators, specifically bumblebees and hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are cool, right? But the bumblebees, and they come in and they're attracted by that, but while they're there, they're going to start pollinating other flowering plants that don't produce as much nectar. Number 3, lamb's cress. So lamb's cress is an interesting one in that, one, there's not a lot of information out there about its ecological benefits. However, it grows in and near clean moving water. So if you have a water harvesting system, as shown in this video here, or if you install a gray water system, and if you want to learn more about installing a gray water system, I'm in the process of building a pretty cool gray water system. And if you want to see that, I'd be happy to share the details, so leave a note in the comments. But if you have any sort of water systems, ponds, swales, etc., and you plant this lamb's cress or watercress along the edges, it lets you know that your water system is doing a good job in promoting clean water that's not stagnant and doesn't have ick in it, because the lamb's cress won't grow in dirty, stagnant water. What number are we on? Someone should check. I don't know, but we're on to plantain. Plantain is a low-growing herb. It's one of my favorite herbs to grow. Because it's really easy. Half the time you don't even need to plant it. It's just going to come in if you have bare soil, because a lot of people consider it a weed. But it grows pretty vigorously. It provides habitat to insects and makes a good mulch plant. And if you happen to get stung by one of those insects, chew up one of the leaves, put it on that sting, bada boom, bada bing, you're done. I know that was a medicinal use. I shouldn't have gotten into that, but I did. Here we are. What are you going to do? In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier with mugwort, if you're going to have any animals in the eco garden or in the food forest for any short periods of time or whatnot, plantain is a great fodder plant for them. Or if you harvest it, rabbits, chickens, sheep, goats, you can cut it and bring it to them. And it's a very vigorous grower. So you'll have an endless supply of a very nutritious food for other elements in your garden. Number 5, staying alive. And that would be chamomile. Chamomile is really cool in that it reduces ammonia in the soil. It helps break down organic matter into a usable form for other plants. In doing so, it helps stabilize nitrogen, which creates a rich humus layer in the soil. And chamomile is interesting. It's used in one of the biodynamic compost preparations. That's a whole nother can of worms, but the results are awesome. If you want to learn more about that, comment biodynamics. I'll cover some of the biodynamic preps. On to number 6. And it's definitely a favorite in my household. My wife loves it for eating and medicine. Hey, she's an herbalist. She loves most of these plants. I think it's great for both of those. But number 6, stinging nettle, is one of my favorite plants to grow just for the benefits it has in the garden. 1, it makes great habitat for insects. If you leave a stand and let it overwinter and don't bother with it, you're going to have a whole host of beneficial insects emerge in the spring that'll gobble up all those pests that you don't want eating your tender garden crop. It's also what we call a dynamic accumulator, in that it really digs down deep and pulls nutrients out of the lower layers of the soil. And when you chop it and drop it, as I mentioned with mugwort, and you use it as mulch, it's a very nutrient-rich mulch that, as it breaks down, feeds the soil around it. Again, stinging nettle is one of the other plants used in the biodynamic preparations that create really cool compost. But if you just grow a bunch of stinging nettle and make compost out of it, that is some of the best compost you can get. Granted, you need a lot of stinging nettle, or you got to go harvest a lot to make a pile of compost out of purely stinging nettle, but it's well worth the effort. 7, this one's not a member of the herbaceous layer. It's a tree, and it's the crabapple. And trees in and of themselves offer so much to all life on this planet. So planting trees, that's what it's all about. But crabapples themselves, they're generally a subcanopy to maybe a canopy tree. So they'll grow tall. They leaf out pretty well if you're not pruning them. So they're providing all sorts of benefits to the soil by slowing down rain and reducing compaction, deep roots to stabilize soil and prevent erosion. The flowers, and there's all sorts of crabapples that flower at different times of the year. They attract all sorts of pollinators that'll benefit the rest of your garden. And a lot of pollinators. It's time for the Ocho. Want to watch some dodgeball? Number 8, thyme. Thyme is a very pollinator-friendly plant. It's great to plant it along your garden edges, or even the edge of specific beds, because it's low growing. You can use it as mulch. It's got, tastes good in salads, but it's also really good at reducing erosion. Really deep roots, and it'll help stabilize your soil so it's not washing off down to your neighbors or blowing across to another neighbors. We want our soil where it is, because soil is the source of all life. Most of it, unless it's water. Last but not least is number 9, chervil, French parsley. This is an herb that is great to have just because it brings diversity. And the more diversity we have in plants, the greater diversity we're going to see in beneficial insects. This one's kind of a stretch. You can't win them all. The point of this whole episode was that the herbs that we rely on for medicine and or magic provide medicine and magic for the ecosystems that they grow in. So don't focus on just growing food for your kin and kith, because food is important. But as we're seeing with what's going on in the crazy world today, medicine's just important. So keep your supply chain local, and grow your own food, fiber, fuel, and medicine. If you want to honor the land, connect with your ancestors, witness the gods, all while saving Midgard, consider subscribing.